Well,
After all these years, I still haven't gotten any better.
for a young man growing up with Star Wars being like my life when I was a kid, as well as everybody here probably, could you still believe that it kind of enthralls us after all these years, and obviously future generations as well. My 5-year-old loves it because I've made her watch them. Watch this. You've got to watch this. What does that feel like to be still as popular, even more popular as you go on? Really, in some cases, isn't it?
Thanks, Tim.
You're the most popular,
Oh well, as to the reason why it's been so popular for so many years, I have absolutely no idea, except that we have all grown up with you guys, and now your kids and your grandchildren, which for us is a particularly amazing thing, actually, to have been there in 1976 as I was, and then the couple of years later as these guys were, because they're so much younger than me.
You stole my line.
It has been something of an amazing thing. Nearly 50 years now. And when we made the first movie, we all thought we were in Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. So it really was something of a surprise that even then it immediately became so popular and has lived for the last 50 years as one of the biggest worldwide franchises. I think because all the characters are so instantly recognizable, and you all find traits in those characters that you recognize and that you like, as indeed do I. But I'm going to pass this over to my esteemed friends here to add their erudition to this question, but they're somewhere around. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Rose.
Well, he stole my opening line, because I always like to say that I came into Star Wars by being a fan. I was a teenager. I was at the cinema watching High Plains Drifter and all these other movies, and all of a sudden this movie came out that wasn't anything like the other movies. My buddies and I were in the cinema. We went back 5 times, feet up on the seats, flying X-Wings. We loved this movie, and we loved what you did in it. But then, a surprisingly few years later, I find myself saying good morning to Harrison Ford, walking past Carrie Fisher, and climbing into my own spaceship. So I can tell you as a young man, jobs didn't get much better than that. It was great fun.
Hey, I got my own,
You got
thanks.
your own.
Yeah, it was downhill from there, really. It's been downhill ever since, hasn't it, for us? But yeah, like you said, we were fans of the movies, the same as you guys were. So, and I loved Yoda in Empire Strikes Back. I was still at school at that time, and I was obsessed about Yoda. How was he going to work? What was he going to... He was like the first animatronic puppet, really, wasn't he, on film? So, and I was a big Muppet fan anyway, so I knew that Frank Oz was going to be working this thing. So when I got to work on Jedi along with Tim, yeah, like you say, we were stepping into our childhoods in a way. I mean, we were living the next installment in real time, you know, as a fan, right? And here we are, however many years later it is now, and back then, we couldn't see this far ahead that this would even still be, you know, a thing. And yet it's even more of a thing now than it was then. It is wonderful. Like you say, the multi-generations, it's international, it's timeless. And you know, we've made so many friends because of Star Wars, and we get to see each other again and again now because of you guys, because of this. And I always think of it as the gift that keeps on giving. It's like a genie to me, you know. It keeps granting all these wishes for us. It's such a beautiful thing. So thank you to George Lucas for sure, and thank you to all you guys as well.
Again, like you say, these guys have been in it from way back then. I'm more recently, but all I can say is I must be the luckiest guy on earth, because I came in with Mike and that, being a puppeteer, doing creatures and things, and one day I was asked, could you jump inside this famous dustbin? They shut the lid, and I've been there ever since, you know what I mean?
What I was going to say is, I mean, you often find you get an actor that's instant recognisable, but then people see you. I'm going to use these a lot, but then you see Greedo like that, and then you think, yeah, there's somebody in that, and then you get recognised as a person, and you're inside a costume, and that's the power of the actual movies.
Well, for me, I mean, like all of us guys in green heads or blue heads or whatever, for a long time we weren't recognised, of course, and that was great because there was a certain amount of anonymity about it. So other bits and pieces that you might have got recognised for, but certainly not as creatures until now. Years down the line, the characters themselves, that little plastic figure and the ones next to it, are much more famous than we are because they've become icons all over the world. So many people will recognise them as soon as they see them.
Completely different franchise.
I'm constantly being upstaged by very, very cute animals. Hey, I've got a pin, you know, and I know how to use it. Yeah.
Mike and I both worked with the Muppets, which actually had a good influence in a lot of the Star Wars characters. Certainly Akbar ended up being operated the way he was because of what I had learned while working with Jim on the Muppets and how we learned to work together on things. But what always amused me was one day I was talking with Frank Oz, and he said, Tim, I'm the luckiest man in the world. He said, I'm a multimillionaire because of what I've done, because he was Miss Piggy, he was Yoda, he was Fozzie Bear, but I can go into any restaurant I want to and sit down and enjoy a meal. And people don't appreciate, but a lot of the famous people, certainly if you get to Harrison Ford or somebody like that, what we take for granted, being able to go to a corner store and pick up the Sunday paper and walk home again, they can't do. They become prisoners to their own stardom. So being inside a costume definitely has its advantages.
I think that would be a good problem to have. I wouldn't mind that.
So, I mean, and yourself, Jimmy?
Again, I don't know how, but from coming into the bin, whenever I go anywhere, somebody always knows me. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter where I go.
Yeah.
There's always somebody can recognise me.
Of course, you've crossed over into different
I've got-
franchises
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
haven't you?
But it's one of these things, as they said, you've got a life, but you have not got a life the way I see it. You know what I mean? Because there is certain things you can't do. You can't just go out and be there, do this, do that. Because no matter where you are, somebody will walk around the corner and you see them going, hang on a minute. And I was like, come here. Excuse me. And you're like, yeah. Sometimes I just go, no, I'm Warwick Davis.
I mean, you've got to remember that, like, you know, people see you and they think, yeah, you're a creature, you're in a costume. But as you mentioned earlier, Tim and Mike, you know, you were puppeteers. You were, you know, qualified puppeteers, experienced puppeteers as well. So you learnt that skill. Where did you learn that skill from? Was it something you always wanted to do?
Well, let's see. For me, definitely, yeah. I wanted to be a puppeteer as a kid, and I had a puppet show when I was 8 years old. I was rubbish, but you know, I wanted to do it, and I was big into Disney and drawing. And had Jim Henson and Muppet Show not come along, I probably would have gone into animation and artwork and big Disney stuff, animation. But I got obsessed with Muppet Show, and so I sort of partly taught myself how to work Muppets in that way and puppets, and I built my own puppets with pocket money, basically. I bought materials and made a lot of mistakes, and I was the first kid in my school to take sewing just so I could make puppets on school time. And I was also the last kid to ever do it as well. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
And my favorite story to embarrass Mike is...
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
They filmed the Muppet Show out at Elstree Studios, well, at ATV, across the road from there. but it wasn't too far from Mike's house. And you were how many years old when you started coming to watch?
15.
15.
Yes, I'd bribe my way into the studio with cigarettes and chocolates past security so I could watch them shoot Muppet Show.
And
Couldn't
it
do that
basically
now.
got to the point where Jim said, "This kid ain't going home. We might as well give him a job."
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask how these parts came about, but what about for you, Paul? How did it all start?
I was an actor. An actor. I started off life as an actor.
Yeah, legit.
Legit. And I had done a thing with Anthony Daniels, who was C-3PO. And we were in Jackanory, which some of the older members of the congregation here will remember. It was a kids series on BBC with storytelling. No one's going to admit it. They won't admit it. They're far too young. But we finished that, and he rang me up about a week later and said, "I'm doing a movie in which I'm playing a robot, and the director needs some other actors. Would you be interested?" So I said, "Well, are they paying real money for this?" And he said, "Well, yeah, tuppence halfpenny." So I said, "I need the work. I'd love to do it. What have I got to do?" And he said, "Well, come along to Elstree Studios. I'll get them to give you a buzz." So about a month later, I found myself going to Elstree Studios very early in the morning. And I got onto set somehow of the very first Millennium Falcon, which was a couple of painted flats and a ramp and sand everywhere in the studio and some great big arc lights. And there was nobody there because it was really early, apart from one little guy in the corner. I went up to him and I said, "Hi, I'm Paul. I'm coming to." "Oh, you couldn't get me a cup of coffee, could you? I'm desperate. I haven't had any breakfast. And is there any chance of a?" And he went off, got me a cup of coffee, came back, and I was drinking it. And I said, "Do you know anything about the movie that they're shooting here? I've got to see some bloke called George." George. He said, "I'm George Lucas." And for some reason, I got the job. God knows how. After asking him to get me a coffee, he ever gave me a job. But that's God's honest truth. That's what happened. And about 2 weeks later, I found myself in the costume department, the wardrobe department, then doing a life mask with some plaster of Paris on my face, and that's how I got into the costume. And I didn't see the character or the costume for the character until about a month, 2 months later when we started filming, which was pretty hairy.
What about you, Jimmy?
Again, I got into it by accident. I went for an interview for a film way back when, and this guy came out, just something the same as Paul, started talking away to me, and I'm, right, okay, I haven't a clue who he is, but he's talking like he knew me. And he's like, "Right, so tomorrow," and I'm like, "Tomorrow? What the you talking about, So the other guy that was supposed to be the interview came out and he says, "Jimmy, can I have you in?" And this guy goes, "What do you mean have him in? He's got the job, as you know." And again, it had to be so-and-so down the corner there that this guy thought I looked like. And he says, "Would you like a job?" And I'm like, "A job doing what?" He says, "It's stunts." I'm like, way back then, I never knew. I thought, "Stunts what?" He says, "Well, we fly in wires, we throw you here, we crash you here." I thought, "Oh, does it pay?" He went, "Yeah." I says, "But what?" I mean, bear in mind, this was way back in the 80s. And he's like, "Oh, something like 300 and so on." I says, "What, is that a week?" He says, "No, a day." I says, "I'll take it." And that was that. From then on, I carried on for maybe 10 years as a stunt guy, doubling for all the small people, children, and that in movies. I mean, I've done Loch Ness with Ted Danson when we'd done that. All these guys, filling in for them, different things. And then I moved on to commercials where I played creatures, started playing creatures. I think the first one was a Toyota advert about how safe a Toyota is. But we were the creatures that smashed the Toyota up in this dream scene. Things like that. And it's just snowballed since there and kept coming on, And now I'm where I am now. I don't know. I keep saying I can't go any higher. I'm ready to come down the ladder and retire. But every time I reach that last step, somebody phones, "Oh, could you be this for us?" I'm like, oh, "Jeez."
You take it up. What I want to talk to you now, gentlemen, is the fact that, you know, the magic days of those 70s and 80s and the puppeteering and the costume characters, and suddenly we had this shift where we went at this CGI. Do you think it's lovely that you look at Andor and you look at Mandalorian and the costume characters are coming back, aren't they? They're back again in the scenes, aren't they? It's nice that we've come full circle back to what we had before, isn't it?
Yeah, the CG was taking over, and it got to the point where you're in a completely green room talking to a green ball and all that sort of thing. But one of the people who I respect is J.J. Abrams. He realized how important it was for us to be in the game too.
Well, he brought back film as well. He started shooting on film again, which we had never seen in years. So.
And he built entire sets that were actually there. And it does make a big difference, because when you go in there to do the job, you're playing. You're just having fun and playing. And if you can have the full fantasy around you instead of having to make it up in your head,
it's definitely come back around, hasn't it? It never fully left. There was always something going on. And I also got involved in animation as well, because the skills do translate.
He went to Pixar,
but my animation informed my puppetry as well. You know, it's all about clarity and communicating something in the simplest way possible. But it's lovely to see now that directors and producers are realizing that audiences respond well to practical effects, to something that's real. Even if it's more limited than what CG can do, that's better, because less is more. And sometimes with animation, it can be too much. You know, they move things because they can, whereas with puppets and creatures, we don't move them because we don't have to, because they're so heavy. And the limitations are sometimes what defines a character too. Sometimes, you know, and there's something lovely about that. So we're in a good place right now, where everything is being used, I think, for the way it should be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, Mike. I mean, one of the interesting things from our point of view is the original cantina sequence, which everyone is familiar with, even the people who don't like Star Wars. They know what the cantina is. And the great thing for us was that it was real, and we could go and sit in the booths and watch other bits of the filming, which was as fascinating to watch as when you see it in the movie. I mean, the creatures that they had in the little booths that never appeared in the movie, but were just fascinating, were so intricate and so well designed and so well placed and so well lit that you just had to go and look at them. And some of that magic that we were aware of, I think once that can be incorporated into a movie, whether it's 50 years ago or today, then translates to you guys who are watching it, or to us who are watching it. And that's why I agree with you entirely. I think entirely 100% CGI or animation is not a great thing, particularly with all the benefits of AI that you get today. You can still easily distinguish what's real and what isn't real. Maybe the time will come when you can't, but at the moment it's still possible to distinguish that. So I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and a lot of CG animation has dated quite a lot now. It doesn't look as good as it did, say, 15, 20 years ago.
Right. A lot of what we did with the puppets, you had monitors to work off of. And the secret was you were watching the performance. So if you believed what you were watching on the monitor, you knew the audience was going to believe it as well. So you had to first convince yourself before you could convince anybody else. But that was very helpful for creating the weirder creatures. So
I honestly think that, you know, you can't take away Yoda from Empire Strikes Back and Frank Oz puppet, you know, that into a CGI. Just, no, it didn't work for me. I mean, it's still Star Wars, but that original puppet, it cannot be replaced. It cannot be, there's magic. But yeah. I think it's children as well. Children see characters, they see costume characters, and they think, it's the magic of thinking, wow, just checking, that they are somebody in the somebody, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I'm trying it with the children in the audience. What I would like to ask you as well is, You've got yourself, you mentioned ILM there. So again, people don't realise that you've got a special effects, industrial light and magic background as well. What was that like working for them?
Well, yeah, you kind of touched on that as well when you were at ILM there. But yeah, it was just another way of bringing something to life, but it was a lot slower. That's the thing. And I did miss the real-time live-action puppetry stuff. So after I was a couple of years at Pixar and then a year at ILM, our animation training room was, I think, where you guys did your creature shop building stuff with Tippett. Because, yeah, Tim was part of the creation of Snoodles and Akbar, and I don't know. Yeah, you did stuff in the creature shop, didn't you? There,
Phil Tippett, who was in charge of the creatures for the Return of the Jedi. When I first went in there and started working with him, he was planning on doing the Rancor Pit Monster as he had a go motion technique. It was stop action animation, but he could make the puppet just move slightly as the camera snapped, so it gave a blur to it. And then when you put all the frames together, it made it look more realistic than the original Harryhausen stop action animation. But when he saw what I was getting with Akbar, he kind of fell in love with live puppets too. And he ended up making the Rancor Pit Monster what we would call a Bunraku style, a figure that's operated on rods. And he turned him into a live puppet as well, which I found very flattering.
It was great.
He liked what Jim Henson and the Muppets, that side of things, was doing with creating the animations.
See ya.
Even dinosaurs have to go to the men's room. Look at that.
Yeah, apparently.
Toy Story invades Star Wars. There you go. Would you like to have some questions, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls?
Hi, guys. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. My question... I know you're busy. You are busy, though. My question is... I work in a school and I teach children. I've been doing acting and extra work for about 10 years now, and I've always wanted to get to the working with the main stars and the main shows. But I was lucky enough that I worked with Harrison Ford in the last Indiana Jones. It was like a dream come true. And I had the figures and I was obsessed with them. So my question to you is, if it's anyone you could work with that you haven't, who would you love to work with?
Well, I can say my biggest hero ever was Sean Connery. And I did get to work with him. They said it was a film so bad it went straight to video. It was called Sword of the Valiant. And he was the Green Knight in that. And the director came up and said, right, tomorrow's Sean Connery's last day of work, and where's the animatronic head for his death scene? And I went, nobody asked me to make one. And this other guy who'd been working there, who was supposed to make it, had already left and hadn't made it yet. So at 11 o'clock at night, I'm there with the little foam skin of Sean's Connery, putting a balloon in it so that it can shrink, and putting finger stalls in it so the mouth would move and everything, and spent all night making this animatronic prop to shoot the final scene with Sean Connery. And they dig a pit on there, they lay out all his armor, and I get under the armor and I put my head into the my hand with the head on it into the helmet, and the director says, turn over. And I hear, excuse me. This young man and I, are we meant to act together? And yeah, well, what's going to happen? You're going to say the dialogue, and he's going to do the mouth sync, and while he does it, then your head shrivels away because you're dying. It's your death scene. Okay, turn over. Well, excuse me. And he said, if we're meant to act together, don't you think we should rehearse? And I pulled up the edge of the armor and looked out of my hole and said, thank you, because I spent the whole night making this thing. You know, had no idea what was going to come out of this man's mouth. So I actually got 20 minutes where the rest of the crew all went on tea break, and the two of us just sat there, and he's like, so if I say things really slowly, I says, yes, that'll help a lot. And I showed him, you know, I apologized for how terrible this was, and he looked at it. And he was always my hero. And after working with him personally, he was just as lovely a human being as he came across on screen. So I got to meet him.
I envy you. I never met Sean Connery. I agree with you. But you know what they say? Never meet your heroes, because you're always going to be disappointed, which is actually not really true, because I'm sure we've all got stories about various individuals, but I was lucky enough to, my favorite actor of all time was Marlon Brando, and I always never got to meet him or be in a movie with him. But the second best thing was, my second favorite actor was Rod Steiger, and I was in a movie with Rod Steiger, so that was pretty impressive. And he was kind of a bit of a diva at the time, because it was the end of his career, and he wasn't very happy on the movie that we were doing. And halfway through the scene I had with him, this was in London, being shot in down the Mall, and they closed off the traffic around the Albert Hall, which would not happen today. And all stuff had ceased, and they got 3 sets of cameras filming an outside scene. And he stopped everything and said, I'm not feeling this, and just left the set. And we had lunch at the Savoy, which was just up the road, and then he came back about a day later, and we carried on with the scene. That couldn't happen today. But so part of that was me thinking, my God, this is what film stars are really like. You know, they can stop everything. And the other half was thinking, my God, what a thing to do, you know. But it is true. Sometimes you meet your heroes, and they're not as exciting as you'd want them to be. Harrison Ford, yes.
Mike and Jimmy?
So let's see. For me, there are 2 people I would like to work with. Three people I would like to work with. One is living and one is not living anymore. But that still counts, right? You know, because this is in the made-up world now. So the person who I think is still alive that I'd like to work with is Paul Blake. We've not actually worked together, have we? Like on set, so we haven't done that anyway. But who's no longer with us, someone who I would have loved to have worked with, is my comedy hero, Stan Laurel. Of course, he lived up in Bishop Auckland here when he was a lad, not far from here, right? So I'd love to have worked with him. I did speak with his daughter, though. I've been working on a documentary about when he came to the UK in 1947. So I kind of, in a roundabout way, get to work with him, but not quite. So, yeah. I mean, it's a cool question, though. I have to think some more about that.
Yeah, again, in my part, I don't know. I really don't know. If I had to pick anyone recently to come up, I think it would have to be Vin Diesel if I got a chance, you know? Because I've worked with everybody. I've had Carrie Fisher, Mark, Felicity Jones, John Barrowman. You know, I've done them all. And even through the Doctor Who, you've got Chris Eccleston, everybody like that, Dave Tennant. You know, there's no really anybody else I can think of that would say, oh, that would thing me. The only bit I like is if I got Vin Diesel and got some maybe, what will we say, Fast and Furious 20 or something like that, you know, because it just keeps, I know, it just keeps going. I know, it keeps going. But apart from that, I think that's about the only one I would like to get somewhere with, yeah.
Can we have another question? Anybody? This lady over here?
Thank you all for coming along. So all of you deal with props and costumes and things. Have any of them made their way off set where they shouldn't have to your homes? And if multiple, do you have a pride and joy?
Well, yeah.
I stole my gun that I used in the scene with Harrison.
But what happened to it?
And they were all Mausers. They were all German guns that were decommissioned that didn't obviously work. And the props department had put little bits of plastic on to make them look like space guns. So I had young kids at the time, so I took it home and gave it to one of them to play with. He played with it for about 2 years and then broke it, and I threw it in the bin. That gasp is I'm with you there. You know how much that's worth now. There's only one more expensive, and that's Harrison Ford's, because he's still got his. But so I threw my kids' education in the bin.
Again, myself, no, I've never stole nothing, but I have got every mask from Doctor Who. We used maybe 3-4 masks a week, you know, everyone, and they used to take them off, rip them up, put them in the bin. And I says to one of the guys, I says, why? He says, well, it's just the way it is. We just take them because if they don't get treated right, then they rot and they're wasted anyway. I said, so can I have them? And he said, help yourself. So I've got one of each of them in the house, you know what I mean? I've got the Mox, I've got the Banner, the Grask, the Grosk. I've got the face and hands from Harry Potter, the only set that's in existence, because the first Harry Potter was done by Silicon, and I'd never tried it before, and they just ripped them off and binned them. And I said to him, he says, take it if you want it. So I've got that in the house, you know, and it's just the face, the front face with the nose, but I've got the actual hands that you put your hands in as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I don't have anything, but I did learn that if you find out where all the Star Wars actors live and you follow them home and you go through their bins, you get some great stuff. There's a gun from Star Wars, a blaster or something I got one time. Oh my goodness, I made so much money out of that stuff.
I think it would either need to be with the Darth Vader mask, but honestly, with
Jimmy's got loads.
Princess Leia's gun. That was the first time I had really seen a female on screen, not just standing back. You know, actually fighting her way out. It was a case of, and even though she didn't have a lightsaber and wasn't a Jedi, she was incredible. So, yeah, that would have probably just the full thing. You know, just put me on the set.
I would have taken
Thank you.
Dorothy's red slippers from The Wizard of Oz, because they sold for what, $4 million about 2 years ago.
I didn't need to pinch it because I had extras. I did a movie, Return to Oz, and I built and performed the TikTok character. And I had one of TikTok's chest badges off of the costume, off the robot thing. And I was working on a small BBC thing. It was Wizards versus Aliens. And one of the guys I was working with was this young Spanish kid, and he was talking to me, and he got into the movies because he had seen Return to Oz as a kid and fell in love with it so much that that's all he wanted to do with his life was to make stuff like that. And he was just so good and so dedicated and so endlessly helping to me on this horrible low-budget job that we were on that I wanted to give him something special. And my wife gets really upset with me because I do this all the time. I give away these things I could sell for a lot of money. But anyway, because he had been so helpful to me, and because Return to Oz was his thing, I got this badge and I put it on a little wooden plaque, and on the back of it I said, for work above and beyond the call of duty, you are now a member of the Royal Army of Oz. And I took it into work and I handed it to him. And he came running at me, and he was in tears, and he was trying to hug me and everything. And I said, oh, no, man, man up. We're not. I don't do that hug thing, you know. I just don't do that. But it's nice when you can make somebody happy like that. So.
Any other questions?
Sorry, the first thing to say is obviously hand shot first. Yeah. So you mentioned AI before, but obviously the cinematic world is changing dramatically with streaming services. How do you see that impacting? Because obviously everything becomes about the dollar at the end.
The answer will be different every week, right? Because it's changing that fast. Well, for one thing, I'd say, we'll get to a point just like we did with CG where we will use AI in a smart way to help what we do, not to replace what we do. And I think that's where, when AI grows up, that's where it will be in our industry. We will use it as a tool. Yeah.
I'm not so worried about AI in the industry. I'm much more worried about what Stephen Hawking said about AI, since I tend to believe kind of what he said, which was it would, or it has the potential for killing us all. And the way the world is going, I think that's far more of a threat than what it might do in the movies. I think there'll always be room for human beings, but it is particularly impressive in many areas, and it's kind of like the argument against plastic and for plastic. We can't take plastics away anymore because we need them in medicine, but we don't need them at all in our seas and in our ground and in the air that we breathe. So it's the same problem.
It's inevitable. It is coming. We cannot, the tide will come in as it always does. So it's what we do with it, honestly. Yeah, and that's up to all of us, especially Jimmy.
What I do like about streaming is that my wife and I, especially since the pandemic, we've never come back out of our house. We're just box set fanatics now, Call up everybody. Which one have you seen? Oh, yeah, I haven't seen that. What I like about them is that hate like love on there. They brought back a sort of democratic choice where the big boys aren't ever doing anything new. I mean, how many times is Disney going to make the same movie in a new way because it's the same old movie, but they know it has an audience for it? And it's killed off the originality and creativity. And I think the streaming, where people are able to democratically vote that, oh yeah, I really like that, is helping to bring a new time, a new era of people taking a bit more risk and trying different avenues to go down with the entertainment. So I like that bit.
We'll just take one more very, very quick question. This lady over here in the black T-shirt, very, very quick.
Pass across.
This microphone will self-destruct in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2.
Oh, yeah. So I was just going to ask before about the Return to Oz. It was a childhood favourite of mine, and it gave me nightmares. I don't know if that's, okay if it have both nightmares and favourite.
Was it the Wheelers?
Well, I loved TikTok.
Oh, okay.
The Wheelers gave me nightmares.
Yeah.
But the Princess Mombi's heads, did you have anything to do with that?
Thank you. No, everybody always says the Wheelers. Princess Mombi, she had the ability, she had an entire room full of heads. And the heads were all actresses who were all standing like that with a prosthetic neck on them, with their heads facing up, so that there was just heads on plinths all the way around this room. And while we were filming that, I just said, this is just so horrific, so scary, that's going to be the one. But most people said it was the Wheelers. So, can I tell a long story about the Wheelers? You said we don't have much time.
Yeah, we've got another talk coming up. Oh, sorry.
I am Britain's oldest animatronics designer. I can say that because
you're old.
There were no animatronics designers before Jim Henson. He was trying to get his New York crew over to the UK to work on, it was the Muppets Most Wanted. Great Muppet Caper. They wouldn't let him bring the American guys over because there were too many British guys out of work in the film business. So this British producer said, what you got to do, you got to give your guys a name, a job title that doesn't exist in the UK. And we became animatronics designers. Now, although it was a bit of a con just to get us into the country, It actually was something that needed to have happening, because there was guys like Mike here who was in love with puppets and wanting to do it. You know, it was happening all over the place.
It was a new industry, though, wasn't it?
But it hadn't had a name. It hadn't had a focus. And it got to the point where, although I was one of the first ones, and although I had to hire a lot of British guys to help get the jobs done, by the time we got to the Return to Oz, I couldn't get a job because there were so many British guys doing it. They weren't going to hire the septic tank when there was all these Brits now doing the job. So I'm in there, I'm trying to get a job, talking to Norman Reynolds. He said, Tim, we're having a real hard time with these wheelers. We can't work out how they're going to actually operate. If you can come up with a way to do that, maybe you can get a job on the movie. So I went, oh, great, I finally got a job. I ran home, stayed up all night. I drew out the entire set of drawings of how the wheelers had to be done, had to have friction pads on the front, had to have ratchets on the back, all this sort of thing. And I brought it in. I said, whatever you do, don't show these to this other gentleman, John Stevenson. I didn't want anybody to think I was trying to steal their job. I was just trying to get a job myself. So I handed it over, was sure I'd solved the problem, and I heard nothing from them. So I came back 2 weeks later, went to see Norman, and he's in a heated conversation in his office, so I said, oh, I better not go to him. So I go down to this guy, John Stevenson's room, and on his table is a complete set of prototypes of the drawings that I had done for the Wheelers. So with nothing else to do, I strapped them on and went out in the hallway and started going down the hallway on it and said, well, I would have made this a bit better myself, but it's not too bad. And then as I got more comfortable with it, I got faster, and I rolled off down the hallway, and I rolled past Norman's door, and then I rolled back the other direction past Norman's door. And it was only after I got a job on the movie I discovered that John Stevenson was in there saying the stuff that America had done was total crap. There was no way it was ever going to work. We were going to have to put these guys on gurneys and just pull them through on lines. So that's how I got my job on Return to Oz. But
well, ladies and gentlemen, we could talk all afternoon, couldn't we? The minds are boggling of these guys, aren't they? Wow. Please show your appreciation for Paul, Tim, Mike, and Jimmy, everybody.
May the force be with you.
Thank you.